Hello guys, it's TZK, and today we're going to be talking about Doom at the Dark Ages. I'm finally going to be reviewing this game, basically giving my thoughts and opinions, basically what I think. And you see, Doom at the Dark Ages is very different from the other two games, which I will get further into. And of course, it is the third game in the modern trilogy. And as people know, sequels aren't always perfect. So today we're going to be discussing that as well. But would I recommend this game? Well, that is something you'll have to find out later in the video. But without further ado, let's talk about some Doom the Dark Ages. So I basically got Doom the Dark Ages 2 days early with the premium edition. As you know, with the premium edition you basically get access to the DLCs when it releases, and you get access to the game 2 days early. You even get a digital art book, which is 16 gigabytes, which is crazy. But it does have a lot of content, a lot of video showcases, which I might make for another video. You even get exclusive skins for the Slayer, Mech, Dragon. In terms of the launch for this game, it didn't really launch like the best. It wasn't bad. I mean, I didn't really have any issues with the game on launch. I have an RTX graphics card, so of course it would have ran fine, but I also heard people who didn't have an RTX card who were struggling to play this. And even people who did, they had issues with frame rates and stuff, but luckily I was okay. And it was quite surprising to hear that, considering most Doom games are very polished. I don't remember Doom Eternal having any issues with like frame rates and stuff. And when Doom the Dark Ages launched as well, it got 86% reviews on Steam as of recording this, which I mean is quite low compared to Doom Eternal's 91% and 2016's 96%. I haven't even seen Doom the Dark Ages cross 90% on Steam, but by no means is it a bad game. It is actually quite fun. Going back to the RTX stuff I was talking about, when the game actually released, you actually had to install the latest drivers to play. Well, you didn't have to, but it was more of like a optional thing. And I know some people had issues again, which is why they actually had a troubleshooting guide when you launched the game. You basically met with this screen saying thanks for playing Doom the Dark Ages, you know, troubleshooting guide, FAQ. Although I didn't have many issues with the game, I did still encounter some bugs such as text box errors, which for some reason a random box kept appearing every 10 minutes. There was also some small glitches as well with like dragon levels, but apart from that, you know, it was a very smooth launch. And even installing the game as well, it's only 70 gig, which I think is pretty good, considering most games these days are like 100 gigabytes or more. Of course, keep in mind the DLC later down the line may make this size a lot bigger, but hopefully the DLCs aren't too big. But anyway, when you do launch the game, of course you are met by the main menu, and I just gotta say the menu music is an absolute banger. It does absolutely live up to 2016 and Eternal's theme. However, speaking of music, most music past the menu is quite forgettable. Doom 2016 and Eternal does have some really iconic songs like The Only Thing They Fear Is You, which of course has been memed to hell. And I think a lot of this has to do with Mick Gordon, because of course after Doom Eternal they had some issues. And you see, I'm not trying to call Finishing Move bad or anything. They did actually do good music, but the problem is it was poorly mixed in the game on launch. And of course, again, Finishing Move has some big shoes to fill as well, you know, taking after Mick Gordon. However, I've got to admit the menus are really clean and easy to navigate. Basically everything is clearly defined, there's like loads of white space, etc. So it's not fully cluttered like some of Call of Duty's menus. And level selection is basically split into 22 chapters, which you can go back and play anytime. It's even got a progress bar, basically tell you how far you completed the chapter. You can always replay it again to get 100%. And in the menus you can customize your options for the Slayer, Mech, Dragon, and even weapon skins. You've got different weapon skins you unlock in the game. Some of them can be found by, you know, finding secrets. So now it's time to get into the actual meat of the video, the combat. Of course, this is the most important thing in the entire game. It's basically what, you know, defines if a game is good or bad in the Doom series. And Doom the Dark Ages takes a very different approach with this. Instead of, like, you know, run and gun, fast switching, like kind of style, Doom the Dark Ages is a lot more slower parrying is of course required. As Hugo Martin says, stand and fight. You're basically rewarded for parrying by glory kills, shredding enemy armor, and even some extra abilities like a shoulder mounted turret, like stunning enemies. So glory kills actually return for the third time in their series. Unlike Doom Eternal in 2016, they're actually less quick time events and more in time with the surroundings. Basically just like a quick second like smash with a melee weapon, and that's it. However, quick time events do still exist in the game, however they're a lot less common. They're only really featured in like critical areas, like where you feel like a mini boss or like a leader, but most of the time you just hit them with a melee weapon and that's it. That's your glory kill. Kind of takes away that satisfactory from the other two games, because the other two games of course they were very satisfying with like how you took down enemies, but with this it feels like just a cheap hit and that's it. But Doom of the Dark Ages does have some unique glory kills too, like when you shred the Mancubus in half with the shield. However, I do wish these were a lot more common. And speaking of the shield is actually a new addition to the game with many features. Of course, blocking incoming attacks, both ranged and melee. You can even lock on and charge enemies at a long distance. It even has a chainsaw attachment for cutting into large demons. You can even break enemy armor with the shield. If you shoot it enough, it'll basically glow, which basically gives you the chance to throw your shield at it. It's even used for parkour and puzzle solving, which is definitely helpful at finding secrets around the map. Alongside the shield, you also have 3 new melee weapons. You've got the Power Gauntlet, which is your first one. Basically just fists. Got a flail which can do a lot of armor damage with fire, gives you a lot more armor. And finally you've got the Dread Mace, which is unlocked in like the Lovecraftian part of the game. This is definitely the strongest of all 3. It basically kills anything with 2 hits or less, and these can actually be upgraded at a Sentinel Shrine as well, using gold to get more armor drops. And one issue I have with the melee weapons in the game, the Dread Mace is incredibly overpowered, which means you don't really have to use the other 2. As soon as you unlock it, you can basically just one hit kill anything in front of you, which I mean I suppose is a good reward for, you know, progressing through the game, but it makes the other 2 melee weapons kind of redundant. So you basically use the flail for like a certain part of the game until you basically get the Dread Mace, and once you've got the Dread Mace you don't need the flail anymore. The same thing goes for the fists really. Once you get the flail you don't really need the fist anymore. I've used all 3 of these melee weapons like equally, and to be fair none of them really feel useless at any point. It's just that when you get a new melee weapon you don't need the other one. Now, not to get it mistaken, Doom of the Dark Ages does actually have guns as well apart from melee weapons, and there's mostly 2 variants for each weapon, such as the chain gun and the impaler. The chain gun shoots faster whereas the impaler is slower but focuses on damage. You got a plasma accelerator, you got a cycler, and so on. There's basically 2 different types of each weapon. However, only one of these weapon types are actually useful, which I will discuss further on. There's even new guns such as the pulverizer, which basically shreds skulls and spits them out, as you see in the trailers. There's even a new weapon called the chain shot, which basically shoots a giant cannonball at enemies, absolutely obliterates them. And of course the most iconic weapon in the entire game is the BFG, which returns as a crossbow. No surprise there really. It's actually called the BFC, Ballistic Force Crossbow, which is really interesting, or as I like to call it, the big fucking crossbow. And whilst we're on the topic of guns, Dark Ages does have a bit of a gun problem. So like I mentioned before, you don't actually need all of the guns to succeed. As there's 2 types of the weapon, you only really need one of them. See, this is the thing with Doom 2016 and Eternal, you needed all of the arsenal to basically succeed. Whereas when I played Dark Ages, the only weapon I used was the combat shotgun, because when you fully upgrade it you've got the burst fire, you basically got like extra fire damage which gives you armor. Basically use the chain shot as well, which is really powerful against big enemies. However, I didn't really attempt to use any other weapons like the pulverizer, as instead I just threw the shield at the enemies and that basically just cleared them. So unlike Doom Eternal in 2016, you don't really need to use the whole arsenal, as most of the weapons are pretty overpowered anyway. So in terms of enemies, there's definitely plenty of enemy variety in each level, each having their own weaknesses, armor points and level of attacks. And the main difference between the other 2 games, the enemies are actually a lot more ranged. There's even return of some old enemies such as the Cyber Demon, Revenant, the Cacodemon, which do look a lot more medieval and Lovecraftian. Some enemies have been reworked, such as the Pinky, which now has somebody sitting on top of it, which you have to knock them off. There's even some returning enemies from Doom Eternal, just like the Whiplash, and the Whiplash is still annoying in Dark Ages, so nothing changes. Even the Stone Imps from the Ancient Gods DLC returns, however they don't have any range attacks, thank god. You can even find powerful demons throughout the levels, like Revenants and Mancubuses, so you give the player more health and armor and ammo when you defeat them. However, you have to defeat their armies first to actually bring them out, which is again another unique challenge. Basically you have to fight for upgrades. And in terms of bosses for the Dark Ages, it's probably my favourite out of the Doom series for the modern trilogy. I find Dark Ages bosses to be more challenging. It takes inspiration from the Ancient Gods DLC and Eternal, whilst also putting parrying into the mix. There's even of course some mini bosses such as the Agadon champions, which basically feel similar to the Marauder from Doom Eternal. They of course return throughout the levels as like regular enemies, and you even fight a Lovecraftian boss in the giant mech called the Old One. However, this fight is similar to the regular mech missions, isn't really too different. On the other hand though, you do have the Creed, which is another boss you fight near the end of the game, who's basically a bishop of overseeing the steady flow of central energy to Urdak. It's basically the entire story behind it. And spoiler alert, when he betrays you and works with Hell, Slayer basically comes back from the dead and tries to kill him. So if you didn't already know that, then sorry. And the Creed's boss design is similar to the Ancient Gods Part 1. There's quite a lot of things coming at you at once. I find the boss fight to have like a lot of patterns to it, which is basically takes the same theme as Doom Eternal and Ancient Gods. And the final boss of the game has you fighting Azrak, which of course tests your parrying and shooting ability. And once you do defeat Azrak, you basically go back into Hell and defeat him again. This time you fight Azrak and the Witch. That reminds me of the 2016's boss fight when you get the Crucible. And going back to when I said these bosses were my favourite, that's because for me, Dark Ages bosses feel a lot more challenging. Some of Doom Eternal's boss fights, like the Con Maker, basically just required you to meat hook into and punch her. It's quite easy, whereas these actually feel a lot more challenging. It feels like you're put to the test a lot more. And even with 2016's boss fights, some of them felt really easy, but these definitely do challenge you a lot. And throughout levels, of course, you do get mech and dragon missions. You also get turret missions, which is also a new feature which they've added into Dark Ages. And with the turret level, it's basically just like a cool holdout mission where you just like shoot anything in front of you. You even got like a electric bolt attack for taking down this big demon. However, it does get repetitive very fast. You only got like 2 attacks. You just basically charge up the electric bolt and fire it by shooting bullets. It's quite simple and straightforward. And from the trailers, you may have seen the mech missions, which do look really cool, like when you're playing them, like visually, but they do get boring quite fast. You basically do the same thing over and over again, just in the same setting. And literally, all you do really with a mech mission is just like, you know, punch enemies to death, and that's it. And I think that makes the mech missions easy, is when they go to punch you, you just got to press space. It doesn't matter if they hit you, as long as you press space, like they can't hit you at all. Like the amount of times I've been stuck in the corner, like with 2 enemies, and I just gotta press space and they don't even hit you, is crazy. There's even 2 guns you use in the mech missions. There's the chain gun and the explosive launcher, which when you dodge actually charges it up, does more damage. But again, these missions look cool. They actually do feel really good, like when you play it for the first time. But when you go back to it like 2 or 3 times, it just get a little bit stale. And it's basically like in the same setting. You're basically like in a desert area. Because I feel like another location or like doing something else would be better. Even the mini boss for the mech just felt really easy. All you have to do is basically punch him to death, and then that's it. You just break his armor, punch him some more, and then that's it. The Old One at the end did feel kind of challenging. That was probably the only actual challenge you got out of the mech, but again, those attacks were really easy to dodge. And with the dragon, it's the same thing as well. Visually, it looks really good. The first time you play it, it's like, wow, this is amazing. And to be fair, I like the dragon levels more than I do the mechs, just because the dragons feel kind of unique. You're in different locations, shooting different things, whereas with the mech, it's basically just the same thing. Now, the dragon level does get boring the more you play it. It's basically, again, just the same thing. You just lock onto targets, shoot them, like destroy ships. I mean, it is cool how you can go into the ship, but again, you're basically just doing the same thing. Most missions are shooting down ships. There's not really much challenge with it either. It's just quite easy. It feels like the ships don't even try. But I will admit, with the dragon level, they actually did some unique stuff with it. It does actually feel a little refreshing like every time, whereas the mech thing, you do the same thing every time. Basically has you like maneuvering through all these little areas and like, trying to gun down this little ship. You've even got like these tentacles you can shoot out. And in terms of progression, players can find materials around the map such as gold, which is a lot more common, which is basically used to upgrade stuff like the weapons, the shield, the melee weapons. For example, with the combat shotgun, you can get a burst fire which basically gives you more armor. Even with melee weapons, you get more armor. With the shield abilities, you get like the turret, the chain effect with the lightning. It's basically the currency you use to unlock upgrades in the game. There's even other currencies like rubies and wraith stones, which can be found in secret areas, and it is pretty challenging as well to get them, because it basically spawns a whole new arena. But once you do defeat them, it is definitely worth it. And to upgrade the gear, of course, you find sentinel shrines around the map to upgrade everything from guns to shields. Now in 2016 in Eternal, you basically just found little stations around the map where you could basically upgrade your health, armor and ammo. And it didn't really provide much challenge, whereas with the Dark Ages, you actually have to fight for it. So in some areas, you basically get empowered demons with like armor, health or ammo bonuses, and when you kill them you basically rip out their heart and like literally destroy it in front of them to get your upgrade. It's really cool. It basically adds like that level of challenge. You basically have to earn your upgrade essentially, which is really cool. Definitely just add more challenges rather than Doom Eternal and 2016's version of just like pick it up and that's it. So in terms of story for the Dark Age, it's quite basic in most parts, which means to be expected with a Doom game. It's not really a story driven game. However, it does feel really all over the place. Like it kind of feels like stuff is missing in between, like crucial cutscenes basically explains what happened. Like at one point you're in the UAC for example, and then at another point you could be like in a forest, and it feels like context is just missing in between, which makes it a bit difficult to follow. However, towards the end I did actually find the story interesting. So this is going to be a bit of a spoiler here, but when a Slayer goes into the afterlife after he gets defeated, like, you know, it basically makes you think if he's actually dead or not. He basically goes through the entire afterlife, like basically gets on the boat and tries to get out. That was actually an interesting part. Also, again, when the Creed betrayed the Slayer, that was also a very interesting part of the story. But again, I didn't really find myself getting attached to any characters or care for any events. But then again, I'm not really a big story fan in general when it comes to games. That was probably the only time I actually cared about the story. And again, it is very broken all over the place. But you can find secret codexes along the map, which basically do explain stuff a little bit better. But again, I feel like context with stuff is a little bit broken. And speaking of codexes, in terms of exploration, there's definitely plenty of secrets to find in each level, such as gems, golds, collectibles. Basically stuff that goes towards your upgrades, make you upgrade stuff faster. There's even the secret encounters, which of course gives you the health, armor and ammo. This is something I actually really liked. So in Dark Ages, they've basically got life sigils, which is the equivalent of Doom Eternal's extra lives. You basically have a maximum of 3, and they're actually optional to use. So if you die to like a very stupid death, which you really regret doing, instead of using your extra life, it actually asks you if you want to use it or just want to start over, which I think is a really good idea, because in that way you don't feel like you've wasted it. It's like something really small, and that's something I really appreciate over Doom Eternal. Because when you made a mistake in Doom Eternal, you lost your extra life, even if you had the most dumbest down ever. Dark Ages does at least give you another chance at redemption, but also you can choose to use it as well if you don't want to restart. Life sigils can be found all around the map in secret areas, and they're definitely really useful to pick up. But again, you can only have 3, so it prevents you from basically having an infinite amount of them, like Doom Eternal. Whilst you're exploring the scenery in each map, it is absolutely breathtaking. Like when you sit back and look at the whole game, like just take everything in, it's just super relaxing. Like in the distance you can see like dog fights, mech fights, like carnage and destruction. I would honestly recommend like you take a break from combat and just look at the sky and like everything around you. There's so much detail like going into each level. But of course, do take a break once you're not in combat would be the obvious thing. But jokes aside, I think I did a really good job here. And of course, each location feels so unique with the colour scheme and theme. That's the thing with 2016. You only really had the UAC levels and like hell, and that's it. Doom Eternal did at least have some different locations, and I feel like Dark Ages have a bit more detail in each location, like what you can see around you. Definitely one of my favourite things about the game. But now the real question is, would I recommend it? Would I recommend this game to anybody who loves the Doom series or wants to get into the Doom series? And my answer is yes. Of course, Doom Dark Ages does have its own feel to it. It's not like 2016 and Eternal where you have to basically run and gun. It's more of like a slower paced game where you have to parry a lot, but it does definitely punish you if you don't do parrying or like parry in time. It actually fits any kind of play style, so if you're a casual player or if you're like a hardcore player, This game basically fits any kind of play style, and if you're expecting the same thing as Doom Eternal, I wouldn't expect too much, as this game again is completely different, has its own feel to it. That's one thing I've always liked about the Doom series, it's never really copied each other. They've always had like their own feel, their own approach to the series, and although some games can be better than others, I feel like they're all good in their own way. I feel like Dark Ages is really good in its own way. This is where I'm going to leave it here. If you've played Dark Ages, what do you think? Thank you for watching, don't forget to like, subscribe, do all that stuff, and I'll see you all in the next video.